Right. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. It is the Bottom Line. And of course, if you tune in every Monday evening from 8 p.m., you know that the discussions is solely about businesses. It's solely about economic empowerment. It's solely about employment. It's solely about the development of the economy and especially or particularly how it will benefit you, the viewer, myself, the layman on the street, and everybody else that plays a part in the economic development of Ghana. Tonight, our focus is on E-levy, and of course, we'll expand the discussions to electronic payments. But the angle we are taking from tonight is a very special one. Is it pro-poor policy or not? We all agree that yes, the tax net has to be expanded, and we've been talking about the data here and there, how many people as a percentage of the over 30 million Ghanaians that we have in the country are actually paying income tax, and everybody else is paying VAT when we buy products or when we buy food, when we buy things on the street. But some taxes like income tax, how many people are paying? What are the policies of government? One of the major actions that have happened over the past few months is the E-levy from the very 1st of May, which is next month, and is going to take effect. And so the discussion is rife on that. However, tonight, Vice President has stated that it has to be a pro-poor. Government believes that the 100 Ghana cedi threshold is supposed to protect the impoverished in their country. There are different arguments to that. We would read a statement or a note from Bright Simmons on this one, on this show for you, and then we'll dovetail that into our discussions tonight. But we'll take a quick break. When we are back, our discussions are on E-levy tonight. Right, you're welcome back from that break. Tonight, I've told you that we are discussing E-levy. And let me, first of all, introduce my guests here in the studio for you. And I'll start from my extreme right, in the person of Mr. Jeffrey Ukansi. He is the Executive Director, Revenue Mobilization, Africa. Good evening to you. Thank you very much for joining us, Jeffrey.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you're doing well. It's been a while.
I'm great.
Right, and we have Salom Brantier of Imani Center for Policy and Education. You well know him. He is the Vice President of Imani. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Salom, I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. So to start with, there is, I do hope that you monitored the Vice President last week, but for the purposes of the discussions tonight, we would want to have a bite of what he said, and then we can pick it from there. So let's have a look at what the Vice President has been speaking on. He believes that passing it is a bold decision.
We talked about moving the economy from a focus on taxation to a focus on production. Ladies and gentlemen, as part of measures to get the economy back on track, when we had these challenges, and to improve domestic revenue mobilization and improve efficiency, government has increased a number of taxes. We extended the National Fiscal Stabilization Levy and the special import levies from 2020 to 2024. We imposed initially a luxury vehicle levy, which was later abolished. We increased the CST from 6% to 9% and later decreased it from 9% to 5%. We increased the National Health Insurance levy from 2.5% to 3.5%. We introduced a sanitation pollution levy of 10 pesos on the price of a liter of fuel. We had the energy sector recovery levy of 20 pesos, a financial sector cleanup levy of 5%, and recently the introduction of the E-levy of 1.5% on financial transactions. In fulfillment of our manifesto promise to move the economy from a focus on taxation to a focus on production, we have so far reduced or abolished 18 separate taxes and levies, and most of them were manifesto promises. No such broad-based reduction in taxes has been implemented by any government since independence.
Eighteen separate taxes abolished. However, still, Ghanaians, some or a section of Ghanaians do complain that we are burdened with a number of taxes. But my very first question to my panel tonight is whether the E-levy, of course, we will get into other discussions as well, but whether the E-levy is a pro-poor policy or not. I'll begin with Jeffrey. You are a tax expert. You've been speaking on taxation all this while. Is it a pro-poor policy?
When you look at the E-levy, you would clearly see that I'm one of the proponents of taxation of commercial activities online, actually, e-commerce. I remember severally on one of your sister stations where we're having a tax dialogue, as I've been one of those people who pushed that, look, people were doing business online, and we were looking at some activities like sales that were going on via both international and local spaces, looking at Tonaton for local and looking at Amazon, Alibaba.com and the rest. We were looking at also persons who are actually selling their wares, selling as well as gold, to talk about buildings, talk about cars. People were selling online, and people were also doing these delivery services. So, for example, when we were looking at this, we were looking at activities that people were doing to make profits. So taxing them were what we're looking at to be in the right direction. But if you look at what has been implemented today, clearly, I'll state clearly here that it looks more, to some extent, there are some regressive factors in there. We were looking always at a progressive tax where people would be paying taxes for making profits, and also attempt to ensure that persons at certain very low income levels will be exempted, actually. But when you look at it, a lot of people who are doing this Momo transfers, when you come to the Momo angle, there are persons who are actually maybe transferring monies to their, what you call remittances. Others are also doing business and returning maybe something they have borrowed, cash borrowed, to their suppliers. And so when you look at the taxation that have in place there, it is affecting some of these people and further widening the poverty gap as per our analysis, as we've seen so far. So there's some regressive side of the tax so far, but I must be fair to you that I've not seen a final document that will tell me a total number of those activities that are going to be under the taxed or charged, the E-levy, and then the final activities that would not be covered by the E-levy. So I'm still looking forward to having that chart, that final chart, that will give us a proper view of what activities, the final activities that are going to be charged E-levy and those that are going to run through freely. I think when we get that blank document and filled with information, we can now look at it and then do a final scrutiny. But as it stands now, the E-levy on its announcement has brought some negatives already. You remember the panic withdrawals that happened. It affected the telecoms.
That was expected. That was obviously expected. Right after the announcement by the Minister of Finance in the budget reading in Parliament, people had started panicking. Even at that time, withdrawals had started going on. And so it was expected that once it is passed, with all the brouhaha, with all the noise, and with all the opposition to it, it was expected that withdrawals would go on. And the transactions would go down.
We had forecasted that happening because of other happenings in other countries. We don't live on an island, so other countries were experiencing the same thing after introducing similar tax. And we actually looked at it and we mentioned, but what happened was that the telecos in Ghana, let's come home, the telecos in Ghana have announced to the general public what they've lost so far. Mind you, the charge that the telecos were charging for people undertaking activities via the platform, that 1%, government had a profit share in it through taxation, the income tax of these telecos. And as we speak. So as long as they have made some losses, that should tell you that government has also recorded some losses as well. So even before the passage of the E-levy, there's been some drawback in government revenue. Also, remember the fact that we projected this E-levy for a whole year. First quarter is gone already, my brother. So that means if you divided it by 4, first quarter is totally out now.
I'll come back to you on the target, whether we'll be able to reach the target. Of course, not 1.75 again, 1.5, but still enough to be able to pursue the projects for which government has consistently wanted to do this. But let me ask you the same question, Salom. And is it a pro-poor policy? I mean, you are concerned with the interest of Ghanaians in every sphere. For you, as Imani, how do we look at this?
So first of all, I think that the E-levy tax, as we are trying to call it, was poorly thought through in terms of its conception, in terms of its proposed mechanisms of revenue collection, as well as its modes of implementation. Clearly, it was very obvious from the onset that this was literally a spur-of-the-moment decision, and one that did not take into cognizance a lot of nuances in terms of our economy or in terms of how people interact in terms of business in this country. We have a situation where currently, as of 2022 January, 38.9% of Ghanaians have a mobile money account. We also have the situation where month on month you look at an average of somewhere around 60 to 75 billion Ghana cedis being transacted in terms of volumes annually and monthly, sorry, in the last 6-7 months of 2021. And therefore, mobile money payments have become the major source of remittances for what we call peer-to-peer remittances. That is people paying people without necessarily having to mediate it through, let's say, a bank or other financial institution. And this then creates the thought process for a very interesting statistic, which is that if you look at the sources of income or the modes by which people get their source of income in the poorer regions of Ghana, the northern regions, the savannah regions, the OT regions, etc., you would realize that it contributes to more than 50% of the average income of people in those areas. So what that means is that if you wanted a tax to be pro-poor, then that major source of remittance that ensures the sustenance of the economies of people living in rural areas should not be the target, or should not be what you target or you zero in on to decide to recoup so-called revenue interventions to be able to boost the economy. Why is this very critical? It's critical because this E-levy is not just being taxed on mobile money transactions, but on all
electronic
fintech
transactions
operations.
Exactly.
So this means that the E-levy is a double-edged sword that is not just going to sort of erode profitability or profitable transaction making. It's eroding people's wallets or people's digital wallets. And then it is stifling all the advances that have been made in trying to push Ghana towards a cashless society.
Exactly.
So when you have a situation like that, especially when policy or broad policy approaches for the past maybe 7 years or so have been targeted at
having a cashless economy.
Not even just having a cashless economy, financial inclusion.
Exactly.
Having people join the more formal mainstream finance sector or banking the unbanked, where these mobile money wallets have become digital banks or digital mini banks, and areas where people actually access very cheap, easy to access emergency capital, especially if you look at the models that the mobile money loans, for example, then it becomes very clear that this is really a dagger into the heart of any kind of advancement that we've had over the past few years towards digitization of the cash economy. And for that reason, it is like we have taken 10 steps back when we took 3 steps forward. Because one, this tax is going to stifle innovation targeted at the poor. 2, it is targeting the same remittances that go to become sources of income to the poorer regions in Ghana. And there is data that even supports that the sources of income for the poor regions of Ghana is largely based on mobile money remittances. And then thirdly, you are looking at the aspect where capital access is even going to be endangered, which is going to affect these small and micro-scale enterprises that depend on some of these emergency capital systems that the traditional or the mainstream financial sector does not offer or does not consider at all. That whole demographic of productive people and productive business activity that Ghanaians who are capable cannot access is now being threatened and endangered by the mobile money tax.
I agree 100% with your point, but let me give you this scenario. There is also a section of the public that believes that there are a number of people, in fact, a huge number of people that are thriving on mobile money but have very big businesses or electronic transactions, but have very big businesses. And these people need to be considered also, and not just the people within the areas that, or the enclave that you talk about, for example, in the northern or the western north and so on and so forth. For example, in the real estate industry in Accra, in Kumasi, in Takoradi, and so on and so forth, people do mobile money payments to their foremen, to their architects, and they do huge sums of payments. These are people who are working and need to pay taxes.
Yes, I agree that there are quite a lot of loopholes, especially when it comes to the informal sector, because if you look at the formal versus informal sector in terms of economic activity, you would realize that, of course, the formal sector is just a very small percentage of the active adult population. But we forget one thing, that the same digital systems that can monitor these transactions can be able to pick out these transactional thresholds, for example. So if you were running a merchant account, for example, it is very easy to know that as a merchant, you run certain kinds of transactions. If you were, in fact, I know that there are digital services that even do payroll via mobile money. So these were easy, low-hanging fruit options that could be targeted, as well as the fact that fintech space was growing and evolving in such a way that a lot of these services were becoming more sophisticated and replacing the work of banks, where then we could have begun to then even charge direct pay-as-you-earn income based on some of these mobile money-related, remunerations. However, you cannot just look at transactional throughput or turnover, and mistake turnover to be revenue or mistake turnover to be profit. That classic mistake of thinking that turnover is profit and therefore it should be taxed is one of the things that stifles the actual growth that you would need the economy to have to be able to sustain itself, to pay even more taxes. So when you look at all of these things, and especially when you look at the margins, those margins that creates the little wiggle room or leeway where a lot of those who are providing capital services can gain or recoup some of their investment to be able to reinvest in the economy or save, to be able to create that kind of base that can grow the economy. It's the same golden goose that we are now tackling or targeting. So we want to eat, we literally are at a situation where we want to eat our cake and have it and actually leverage on it to borrow more money for the future.
So yes, a case of the fact that government did not really think through, saw the opportunity and just jumped at it. I'm coming back to you on the target and of course on some of the points that Salom has raised. I realized you were putting on paper some notes. But please, if you have any concern, if you have any issue about what we are discussing, we have some videos, or we have a video on what some Ghanaians think of the E-levy. We'll be playing that to you pretty shortly, but I would go to Jeffrey and come back. You can tweet at us or text us or comment on the discussion on our Facebook page. You can also send a message on the number which is scrolling on your screen, and we'll try as much as possible to read it towards the end of the show. So let me come back to you, Jeffrey. Right. Would government be able to get the target? And as even before that, as Salom says, do you also think it is not a well thought through program?
Well,
policy.
Like my brother Salom said, it's not what we thought, it's what we saw. You realize that they filed with the 3 C's, what I call communication, collection, and communication. And so the first C is communicating to the people, agreeing with them what will be paid, what form of tax are you bringing, okay, for people to understand. Because that was not properly done. You realize that when the discourse was ongoing, then now they had to organize town hall meetings. But this was supposed to be, before you even mentioned it, you should start discussing.
Was that not due to the over-politicization of the issue?
Well, you see, I would like to see it from this angle. Aside what you would call politicization, or rather look at it from the national response, some institutions have carried out researches, and it has totally, produced some results that majority of Ghanaians are not in favor of the E-levy. Okay, like you rightly said, you went around collecting some sound bites, and persons were telling you they were not in favor of it. And so it clearly tells you.
But here we are having Salom and yourself. Right. I mean, virtually educating everybody on what was supposed to have been done, right, even apart from the education. Right. The kind of processes, right, or the proper targeting governments need to do. Who has to be targeted, who has to actually pay. Right. Geographically, economically, the everything that has to go through it. But here, we got to the point where it was just met with opposition. At a point, reduce it to 1% or reduce it to 1.5%, and we are going to get it passed without all of these things that we are going through now. So I am thinking that it could also be an issue.
Thank you for doing some of my job for me. You rightly said that while we're having difficulty with it, and that's what I'm saying, if you had communicated to the people and they had understood it, I'm talking about even the experts. Some of the people who are tax experts have difficulty understanding why at this moment and why at this time, okay? So if you had communicated, the next thing is you should provide a collection plan. I mean, now if I should ask you, it's been passed by Parliament. If I should ask you, which services are going to be affected by the E-levy and which ones are not supposed to be affected? Yes. You are a news house. You should be having something like this to share with us. Has somebody brought to you any document that presupposes which services are going to be charged and which services are not going to? Has somebody brought that to you?
We've seen commentary, we've seen the town hall meetings, and we have picked just a few from them, but no proper.
You quite remember that the GRA came out to even inform us ahead of time that they had a plan that they were going to share with us to show what you have to be paying when you have to do any services around A and B that is affected by E-levy. But as I speak with you, ahead of the May date, okay? Today is on the 11th, okay? How many days do you have? If you even want to communicate that to me and explain it to me well, how many days do you have to communicate that one to me? That's what I'm talking about. That collection plan, that I have to know about. And then also, the third C is communicating what you will use the proceeds for. I didn't force anybody. I've heard people talk about what they are going to be using the E-levy for. You've heard a basket of promises that is going to provide jobs for youth, it's going to be fixing roads. Virtually, it ended up solving every problem we have as a country, because I heard sector ministers saying without E-levy, we are not going to get fertilizers for our Greek. And, you know, if you had all this, my caution is that you've raised the hopes of persons, even ahead of getting the resources for E-levy.
I agree.
It's actually what you've said. And I had a group, like some religious group of pastors saying that there should be a separate, independent body to manage this E-levy. It was based on the promises that they had. You remember when the Minister Riley said that they are going to give accountability on the E-levy and a few things. And then I asked, are you trying to say...
all the taxes that you have been taking, you haven't been accounting properly for it?
So if you thought through this well...
We have PRK and all of those bodies attacking the ministry all the time about
these are
accountability for our funds.
That were associated to poor planning. Because the third C looks at when you've collected, at the second level. The third C talks about communicating to the people. What if you utilize the funds for transparency and accountability? What that will do is that it actually affects compliance. When people know what you use the resources you collected for, they actually comply. I mean, when you listen to some of the E-levy discussions, that's where I actually depolitize it. I don't add politics to it, because I heard a lot of voices of people just asking the number of resources that you've gotten through taxes. What have you utilized these resources for over the years? So it was actually not tagged to even one political party. If you're listening clearly, I mean, I'll be fair, it was not tagged only on the NPP government. It was over time. I mean, to start it well, maybe the Fourth Republic, people were looking at what have you used our tax resources for, and what is there to show? And so when that argument started, I saw the political class explaining, what they've done between the two major parties. But this is what I have to tell you. The truth is that, like Selim said, if they had thought through well, they would have done better. And let me give you an example. When the vice president was speaking, he mentioned the luxury tax. That should tell you, I thought there would be a lesson around that one, because the luxury tax is a very good tax, and I repeat, without fear or favor, that is actually a good tax, but it was poorly implemented. If you were talking about luxury vehicles, you were talking about the Lamborghinis, you were talking about the Maybachs, you were talking about the Rolls Royce. Those were the vehicles using their specs and what their make to charge them, and that would have been best. But when they tagged it to the capacity
of your engine,
that brought the problem. That's when we had this.
There are Honda Accords that have 3.5 engine capacity.
So it was not properly implemented, and that should have been a lesson. So if that went through the 3 C's, the first C, communicating and discussing, would have healed the problem, and wouldn't have needed to withdraw it. If there's any advice around it, they should look at that angle of that, luxury tax and what brought the failure around that one.
Selim, let me ask, is it a case of implementation? What is the problem we have as a country when it comes to some of these things? He's just cited the issue about the luxury tax, which was met with huge opposition, not from politicians alone, but from virtually everybody in the country, importers, exporters, almost everybody.
So you remember in the president's BBC interview last week, Peter, I've forgotten his
Okocha.
surname. Peter Okocha.
Yeah.
Yes, Okocha asked the president, did you talk to people? There are experts, he said. And then he said, we also have experts. So I think what is happening is that the experts that are advising the presidency or the executive in a lot of these issues are either blind to what's happening in Ghana or they have a different set of data that depicts a different reality from what happens on the ground. And the reason why I'll say this is because you are looking at a scenario where you get up one early morning and then announce in Parliament without any preamble, without any sensitization, without any sort of hint that you are going to implement a tax. And then in the same statement, you outline that you are going to spend 200 and something million cedis to try and take that tax. For anybody who has half a brain, that is even ridiculous. And then that is even the first point. Now, the second point is, you outline a tax like this, you have not distributed any circulars to the agencies that are going to be taking those taxes on behalf of the state. And I'm talking about the telcos. You have not engaged any of them to understand even how the processes work on the back end in terms of how these telcos operate. You have not engaged the fintech industry on the parameters of how they do their
major stakeholders.
Exactly, because you see, the point is this. The E-levy is not going to be taken in a vacuum. The E-levy is going to go through certain different channels, and these channels are digital channels. It depicts a very clear misunderstanding and a very, very naive perception of how digital transactions work. For you to look at it in terms of a totalized volume and say that because in September 2021, we got 72 billion, if we multiply it by 0.015, which is 1.5%,
we'll get
this, and then therefore, yay, let's tax them. It is extremely bizarre reasoning, if I should put it that way. The reason is this, because In all these digital transactions, there are intermediaries. These intermediaries have their own internal service charges and certain other things that change the value of these numbers as they go on. Now, for you not to have had a clear understanding of how these operate, and then you are going to impose on them a further cost of collecting this tax, because these systems is going to require them to reprogram their internal systems.
Exactly.
And you see, the thing about the digital technology that a lot of our older statesmen do not understand is that it is different from a tax collector typically sitting behind a table and then just saying that you are holding 100 cedis, so let me take 1 cedi. It doesn't work like that.
But what prevents them from consulting? What prevents them from talking to the industry stakeholders? What prevents them from...
It is just, for lack of the term, I think it's hubris. Any other term I'll use will sound a bit strong. So I would say a certain level of pig-headedness, obstinacy, and a willful desire not to understand the space, but to extract as much from the space as possible. And I will refer to the president's statement again, because he is the most credible source at this moment. He said he's taxing an industry. He is not taxing an industry. He is not taxing a system. He is taxing people's wallets just because they happen to put the wallets in a place where, when they are putting them out there, he can dip his hand into it. And that is not fair or equitable in any theory of taxation that exists.
who have their wallets.
Yes. So you are trying to tell me literally that the fact that I have money in my wallet means that that money should be taken. The fact that I'm paying for a hospital bill for my father who lives in the village, who has retired and gone to the village. Father, I'm paying a hospital for him, and the hospital bill is more than 100 cedis, means that I have to pay tax on it. Meanwhile, I'm paying tax, probably buying the medicine. I'm paying other indirect taxes by virtue of the purchasing that I'm doing. I, for example, I hardly buy fuel with cash. I buy with mobile money. So
once you get to the spot,
exactly. If I buy fuel 100 cedis, now you are going to take a 1.5%, mobile E-levy
from the mobile.
In addition to the slew of taxes you're already taking. So
on the fuel itself.
On the fuel itself.
Considering the prices
there are
of fuel
lots
now.
of instances of double taxation that are taking place that are not even equitable and haven't been really thought through. And now you are going to impose these systems on these telcos and other fintech agencies. They will have to reprogram their systems, realign their systems, and even for those who provide digital capital, they have to realign how they calculate their loan books. And that alone is a very horrible accounting experience. That might even sink some of these, because in my interactions with some of these players in the industry, the tax that they have to pay is more than their margins, which means that their cost of services will rise, which means that certain thresholds of consumers who could access these services will not be able to do so. And these costs are sometimes even more than the margins that are made from operational margins and profit. This tax alone wipes it all out. And then the craziest thing about this tax, which a lot of people have not even sat down to think about, is the fact that there is no upper threshold. There is a lower threshold of 100 cedis, but there is no upper threshold, which means that if you are a business that has a high transaction volume and you have 50,000 cedis inbound or outbound in a day, because of the high volumes, let's say you are a big shop in Makola, already you are paying some kinds of taxes based on your transactions because you have to issue invoices, etc. Now, that volume of 50,000 cedis, you are going to pay 1.5% of it as tax. And when we look at it, a lot of assumptions are that anybody who pays beyond, in fact, that narrative
has
also
that amount
horrible.
of money to be able to pay.
But what if it is money that is actually being used for business transactions, and then you are now taking that 1.5 on it and taking it 1.5 on all consequent transactions? Then that shows very clearly that very poor, very poor
thinking.
Yeah, and bankrupt thought process went through the whole thing. That is why they could not even communicate it effectively, because it was like today, let's do it. It was kind of like, don't call me like you're buying shoes at Kantamanto.
So the question has been, if you're watching us, you can put up your messages through our WhatsApp line, scrolling on the screen. We'll try and read them for you. Was it to score political points? Was it a case of improper communication? Was it a case of misunderstanding of the policy by government itself, or not thinking through, just seeing an opportunity and wanting to jump at it? We will take a quick break. When we are back, we'll play for you sampled bites from people on the streets, the layman, and how they also understand it, what they want to do with it, their reactions, and then we'll come back into the studio to round up. You're welcome back from the breakout. Quickly read, I think, one or two messages. We'll play the bites and then we'll come back into the studio for our discussions. Tonight, we have been looking at the E-levy. Yes, it's been passed. Yes, it's going to be enacted. However, we still looking at the basic things that can be done or the things that government can consider or reconsider in the implementation of the policy. This one is coming in from Daniel Enin Yeboah from Ablekuma. He says, your two panelists are too solid. These are the people that should be appointed into government. Or even when a policy is being made, these are the people that should be invited to the round table before government puts out its programs. I'm sure you want to write policies. This one is Ernest Afinya Mataiku. I think our policymakers are totally confused because this is a double standard. When we are trying to push the economy into a cashless system and at the same time coupled with exorbitant E-levy charges. People would rather be interested in keeping their monies elsewhere than keeping them in e-cash. That's the aim of cashless system is destroyed. My greetings goes to all Ghanaians. I'm from Garu Upper East region. My consent is they should eliminate the E-levy from Momo. It will help Ghanaians. And citizens lost their jobs through banks cleanup. Citizens lost their jobs through toll booth closures. Now, the poor citizens engaged in mobile money businesses are, I think I have, are losing their jobs through E-levy. Are our leaders serving their interest alone? Are our leaders aware of why they are placed in leadership? Are our leaders not misleading us? Oh God, have mercy on the poor citizens of this country. Samson Kwao Akusumbu. You didn't bring your name. You said, I love your panelists. Very, very, very educating. You wrote, I'm sure you want to write very educative. But I'll come back to the number of messages that are coming up. Too many of them coming up. We'll try and read as many as we can. But tonight, we have our guest here in the studio. Let's see the bites of the people on the streets. 2 minutes and we are back.
In a bid to enhance domestic revenue mobilization and to widen the tax net, which will generate the required revenue to support entrepreneurship, among others, the Minister of Finance in his 2022 budget proposed the E-levy. After a rather long and fierce opposition from the minority side of Parliament, on 29th March, the controversial E-levy bill was passed. A day later, the President assented the bill into law. The news was greeted with a series of press conferences from the minority side and their decision to challenge the legitimacy of the passage of the bill in a court of law. Citizens have been vocal in registering their displeasure with the passage of the bill. Sections of Ghanaians explain how they intend to bypass the payment of the bill.
I've been educating people on how to dodge this E-levy or this criminal payment they say we should be paying. The strategy is that if you want to dodge the E-levy, as I'm here now, my wife is in need of money at home. What I do is that I just allow cash out here. She'll go to an agent over there and cash it out. I'll probably do it through my phone. Simple.
We have been saying it that mobile, especially Momo, you should not tax Momo because I've been sending money to the village to my mother. Now, I will not send it again. What I'll do is that through Momo, if I see any trusted person going, I will give it to the person to send it because first time, that's how we used to do it. And that means is that there's going to be a lot of armed robbery in the system. And we will blame the president for it.
Yimano Darkwa is an economist and a partner at CKADD Global. According to him, the government has created a safer and reliable way of transferring money. As such, the risk involved with these methods of transferring money is not worth taking.
It's no.
You're welcome back from that video, but let me start with you. People have started evading already and showing skills of how to evade. Are we going to hit the target as a country?
Well, I'm not surprised. So I told you early on that we had lost first quarter already. It was an annual calculation, a projection, but we've lost the first quarter already. And we'll jump a month into the second quarter. And then also further, there's a fact that we're going to be doing what we call the panic withdrawal again. A lot of people will look to withdrawing or playing around it. like the gentleman rightly said on The Voice, I mean, that people will allow cash out. I know the agent, so I tell the agent that you are coming for some money. So I allow cash out. He knows my number, he allows it, and then I do the transfer, and then you collect the money, as if you are myself collecting the money. So that's another avenue people actually were looking at, evading the paying the taxes. So clearly, you know that I asked again, I mean, have we learned from experiences in the past? Like this Suba arrangements, these were similar arrangements where I remember Imani doing a lot of work around it, advising government that, look, do you have the capacity, do you have the machines to monitor what was due you? Are you really collecting what is due you? So I
There was actually a lot of banter between Imani and government. I remember clearly the period, and I reported on it.
I was following it passionately. I mean, these is a group of people who were like, look, we have to get a lot of money. This is domestic revenue that we deserve to get as a country. So when this discussion was, I followed it. So one, with this E-levy, do we have the capacity to ensure we follow through and collect what is deemed due us? And then look at it from personnel. I mean, do they have the machines? Do you have the capacity to follow and monitor all through and see we are getting what we have to get? Are we also going to follow through and do more and mass education on what to do? Are we also going to consider the fact that maybe just like the luxury tax, we would like to pull it back and then rework it and then see how we can do it such that everybody will be okay with it? While at this, I think we should also look at the setbacks, some of the setbacks. I mean, this was one thing, the transactions, the digital transactions took away theft, robbery. People were not going to be carrying, these market women were not going to carry money in their pockets all around them. Traffic situations, you didn't need to move. It was going to check and control traffic situations for us. And when you look at also the fact that people started doing business on the platform, it was encouraging. Look, we're not against government making inroads. We are saying the major alternative objective that we saw government looking at was to rake in money, to actually come and manage our national coffers. But let me tell you what, there's a fact that exists that there are other options that we can do this. We need to cut down expenditure. Let's check our losses in our state-owned enterprises. Look at the amount of money that are lost. Companies that are producing, they come back and tell us they are making losses. Meanwhile, when individuals take over same businesses, they are making profits. We were running, Vodafone was One Touch, right? And then a company took over. Vodafone is not grounded. They are working still. So that should tell you something, that we did not manage it well. Look at the IFS, illicit financial flows. Look, Africa loses 85 billion. Ghana should be losing close to about 2 billion. What are we doing about it? We should also look at this financial irregularities. In 2020 alone, we lost 12 billion. That is another thing to look at. Exemptions. We are granting exemptions to multinational enterprises. And look, the IEA puts it at 5 billion annually.
Every year.
Professor Bob King puts it at 2.7. I mean, that means there's a huge amount of money we are losing in that angle. You look at expanding the tax that they are looking at, but look at other things. Night and dawn economy. Persons are trading. They bring the goods to Domi market, Malata market. They come at dawn and night. They are not necessarily avoiding taxes. That is the time they do business.
That's the time they get people to patronize.
So where are the collectors to collect these monies from them?
Right.
And finally, I also like to look at expanding the tax base. See, connect expanding the tax net with expanding the tax base. You want to collect more monies? Good. But how are you going to expand the tax base? This 1D1F, let's do something better. Let's add value to our products. Do not harvest cocoa and put it in sack and take it out there. In the global cocoa market, Ghana, La Côte d'Ivoire, 2 world leaders producing, get less than 10%. Think about it.
So let me come back to you, Salom. What should be done? Let me give you the final time.
I think what we need to do is very clear to us.
Even though it's been passed.
I think that we, as a nation, we really need to think about what we want. I'll put it on a general thing. If you look, for example, at the Secondary Sports Stadium, it should tell you the character of the Ghanaian or character of Ghanaian leadership. We like shiny new things, but we don't know how to preserve what we've got. So we jump at every new tax that anybody can conceive and go like, oh, let's get more money to rake more revenue, forgetting that the previous sources of revenue, if enhanced, if streamlined better, if improved, if monitored better, if the systems of collection are done more efficiently, we can actually even, exceed our revenue targets. But every time we have a new tax system or we put in a new tax regime, what we do is that we literally discard the old one. And the reason why we discard it, because then those old ones become revenues or channels for excessive corrupt activity to be done. Look no further than all the PIAC reports or all the reports about embezzlement and all of that. And you would realize that we destroy current systems of revenue generation in this country. We put political agents in there. People with little or no experience are making decisions in organizations that are very critical to Ghana's GDP and revenue and capital creation. And we use them as reward mechanisms for party apparatchiks whose only work was campaigning. Now, if you have that situation and you think those people are experts, what you're going to have is a situation where anytime you propose something new, the distrust of the nation will be so high that it will be viewed with skepticism, cynicism, uncooperativeness, and then any progress that you wish to show will be undermined, especially when the progress that you show is something that is good for brochures and good for making public displays of monuments, but these projects or programs do not reflect in the critical bottom line, which is eradicating, reducing poverty, and increasing avenues of sustained employment. Now, if we want to really move forward as a nation, this ad hoc thing should stop. The horse has already run out of the stable. The other repercussion of this we are going to see is the fact that we are still debating how the tax is even going to be collected. This should be a cautionary tale, and this should be one of the last times as a nation that people who have been given the mandate to make the decisions to affect our daily lives should treat it just like another dogfight about ideas that are already malnourished from the time that they were birthed.
That's Salom Rante, the Vice President of Imani Center for Policy and Education. Of course, I've also had here a tax expert, Mr. Jeffrey Okansi, Executive Director, Revenue Mobilization Africa. I will not just leave you there, but let me see some of the messages that have come from the insightful discussions that we've had here. This one says, okay, let me go to the top and start from there. Hi, I'm Michael Dazzy, a freight forwarder. I normally pay my duties and other shipping line charges, which taxes have been charged on it already through my Momo. Now my problem is, how can I pay tax on taxes I am paying? Big ups to our guests. Michael Dazzy sent that one. Please, with the E-levy, does it affect deposits too? Joshua Sunyani is asking. I'll get the information from my guest, and there is a meeting which is coming up between the Ministry of Information and journalists as well. So we'll get the answers for you in our subsequent meetings. You guys are doing a good job. For Mother Ghana, please tell Selom to call me, Fred Ativo Tuba. Well, so Selom is laughing. It means he knows you. So Fred Ativo, your message has been duly. I'm sure if I'd seen it earlier, I would have told him behind the scene. So E-levy is totally thievery. Kluche Jacob and Fuega Catholic Hospital. You have, okay, I'm not able to read this. Hey, for Tema, your message is well acknowledged, but I have edited it. Well, let me read this last one. Hi, the same poor that they claim they have come to help are the same poor that they want to dupe after the run down of the economy. Godwin from Kakasunanka, number 1. The rest is also edited. This is purely business. Please, when you want to do politics, this is a business show called The Bottomline. We are concerned about empowerment of our people and especially employment, how economic progress of the people of Ghana will go on. The tax widening is not entirely true. If I send money to my carpenter, I'll pay the E-levy, not him. after I have paid income tax on my salary. You didn't add your name to this one. A lot more messages coming up. Please, all your messages are duly acknowledged. Thank you very much for sending them in. Thank you very much, Salom, for being with us tonight. Thank you very much, Jeffrey, for being with us tonight. My name is Kwesi Efrie. This has been The Bottom Line. Thank you for watching. Good evening.